The day my wife laughed at me for packing 2 duffel bags and leaving our mansion, I thought the worst part would be the sound of her voice following me down the marble hallway. I was wrong. The worst part came 3 hours later, standing in an abandoned house that smelled like wet wood and dust, staring at a broken window while rain slipped through the frame in thin silver lines. I'd bought the place 6 months earlier through a holding company. No one knew. Not my wife. Not the people who smiled too quickly when I entered a room. Not the reporters who liked to count other men's money. It was supposed to be an investment. A forgotten property at the edge of town with cracked walls, dead grass, and no neighbors close enough to care. That afternoon, it became home. I still had dirt on my shoes from the driveway when my phone buzzed again. Mara calling, I let it ring. Then again. Then a text. Asterisk, did you calm down yet? Asterisk, I turned the phone face down on a paint-chipped counter and looked around the kitchen. One cabinet hung crooked. The sink was rusted through. Somewhere inside the walls, pipes knocked like somebody trying to get out. Perfect. I needed somewhere ugly enough to match the inside of my head. By morning, I realized I also needed help. The back door had swollen shut from water damage. Half the lights didn't work. There was mold in one bedroom and something dead in the attic. I searched local contractors, skipped the glossy websites, and drove into town. That's how I found her. The sign outside said Holloway Restoration and Repair. The building had once been a gas station, maybe 30 years ago. Now it was half workshop, half office, with shelves stacked with tools and paint cans. Wind chimes made from old wrenches clicked softly near the entrance. She was behind the counter, reading with one elbow propped up. She looked up once, then finished the sentence before placing a bookmark inside the novel. Can I help you? Her voice was calm, low, the kind that made other people lower theirs without noticing. She was older than me by at least 20 years, maybe more. Dark hair pinned carelessly up with a pencil. Work shirt rolled at the sleeves. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes that didn't hide anything. If anything, they made her look sharper. Like life had tried to wear her down and failed. I told her I needed repairs on a property outside town. What kind of repairs? Yes, I said. That got the smallest smile. She stood, took a clipboard, and walked around the counter. No perfume. Just soap, cedarwood, maybe coffee. Address. I gave it to her. She paused halfway through writing and looked at me properly for the first time. The old Mercer place. I guess. No one's lived there in years. Someone does now. Her eyes moved to my wrinkled shirt, then the mud on my shoes, then the wedding ring I hadn't removed. She didn't ask questions. I noticed that immediately. When do you need someone? Today. That desperate. Something like that. She clicked the pen shut. My crew's booked. I'm not. You do site visits yourself. When I don't trust clients to describe damage. I can describe damage. Can you? She asked. I should have had an answer ready. Instead, I just watched her tuck the clipboard under one arm. Outside, the sky had gone gray again. She locked the office door and told a mechanic she'd be back in an hour. We drove separately. I kept checking the mirror to make sure she was still behind me. At the house, she stepped onto the porch like she'd seen worse places and worse men. Inside, she moved room to room in practical silence, making notes, pressing fingers to warped wood, testing switches, looking up at ceilings with the patience of someone who knew everything eventually revealed itself. I followed her around like an idiot. This floor needs replacing, she said. Fine. You're not listening. I am. No, she said, glancing at me. You're staring. Heat climbed my neck so fast it annoyed me. She crouched near the fireplace, brushed dust from a tile, then held out her hand without looking. Flashlight. I hadn't realized I was carrying one. I gave it to her, and our fingers touched for less than a second. Nothing dramatic happened. No music. No thunder. But I forgot how to breathe. She stood, handed the flashlight back, and wrote one last number on her pad. I can start Monday. Why Monday? Because, she said, walking toward the door, if I start today, you'll tell me things you'll regret tomorrow. She left before I could ask what she meant. That night, in a house full of broken things, I kept hearing her say it again and again. Asterisk, you'll tell me things. Asterisk Monday came with cold wind and a leak in the ceiling. I'd barely slept. The house made noises all night, settling or protesting. I couldn't tell which. Every creak sounded like someone reconsidering a bad decision. At 8 sharp, a pickup truck rolled into the driveway. No crew, just her. She stepped out wearing faded jeans, steel-toe boots, and the same work shirt with the sleeves pushed back. Hair tied this time loosely. A pencil tucked through it again, like she trusted objects to stay where she placed them. "You said crew," I called from the porch. "I said Monday," she replied, lifting a toolbox from the truck bed. "Try not to romanticize promises." Then she walked past me into the house. I followed her inside carrying boards I didn't know how to use. She'd brought tarps, tools, wiring, and a kind of focus that changed the rooms just by entering them. Dusty spaces seemed embarrassed around her. She moved quickly, speaking only when necessary. "Hold that. Not like that. You've clearly never done real work." "I've done work. Typing doesn't count." I laughed before I could stop myself. She didn't smile, but one corner of her mouth twitched like it wanted to. We spent the morning in the living room, where rain had stained the ceiling in brown rings. She stood on a ladder cutting out damaged plaster while I steadied it below. Bits of dust fell into my hair. "You enjoying yourself?" she asked. "More than I should." "That's concerning." Her voice stayed flat, but I was learning it. There were small shifts in it. Dryness instead of annoyance. Softness hidden under sharp edges. At noon I brought in coffee from town and set a cup near her. "I didn't ask for this." "You look tired." "I always look tired." "That's not true." She came down the ladder slower than before. Took the cup. Warmed her hands around it without drinking. Up close, I noticed faint paint marks on her knuckles. A thin scar across one wrist. Tiny lines near her mouth that deepened when she pressed her lips together. "When do you sleep?" I asked. "When people stop breaking things." "That sounds expensive." "That sounds constant." She finally sipped the coffee, closed her eyes for half a second. It was the first time she looked older than composed. Not weak, not less beautiful, just carrying something heavy for too long. I wanted to ask who helped her carry it. Instead, I said, "You don't have to do this alone, you know." Her eyes opened immediately. There it was again, that invisible door slamming shut. "You hired me for repairs," she said. Not conversation. Then she set the cup down and climbed back up the ladder. The rest of the afternoon passed in careful silence. Hammer strikes. Boards dragged across floors. Wind tapping the loose window pane. Near sunset. She was loading tools back into her truck when a box slipped from her arms. Nails scattered across the driveway. I bent to help, but she was already kneeling, gathering them too fast. "It's fine," she said. "You're shaking." I said it's fine. Her hands betrayed her, trembling hard enough that nails clicked against concrete. Then, just as quickly, she stopped moving. For one strange second, she looked lost, like she'd forgotten where she was. I crouched beside her and picked up the nearest handful without speaking. She stared at my hand, then at the ring still on my finger. "You should go home," she said quietly. "I am home." "No," she said, voice thinner now. "I mean where someone would notice if you disappeared." The wind moved a strand of hair across her face. Without thinking, I reached to brush it back. I stopped on inch away. She didn't move. Neither of us did. By Thursday, the house had started to sound different. Less hollow, less angry. Boards no longer groaned under every step. The kitchen light worked. The back door opened without needing a shoulder slammed into it. She'd changed the place in small, stubborn ways, and I'd started measuring my days by the time her truck came up the drive. That evening, rain arrived early. Not dramatic rain, just steady, gray sheets that erased the road and turned the windows into blurred mirrors. She was in the dining room, sanding a warped table someone had left behind years ago. I was pretending to organize hardware I'd already organized twice. "You're hovering," she said without looking up. "I'm standing." "You're loudly standing." I leaned against the doorway. "Need help?" "No." "You always say no." "Because you always ask when I'm already doing it." The lamp beside her threw warm light across her face. Her sleeves were rolled high, exposing strong forearms dusted with sawdust. A loose strand of hair kept falling near her cheek. Every few minutes, she pushed it back impatiently. I wanted to do it for her. Instead, I asked, "Why do you work so much?" She stopped sanding. The room went quiet except for the rain tapping the roof. That your business? No. Then why ask? Because no one who's fine works like this. She stared at the table a moment, then set the sandpaper down. My husband used to say rest was for lazy people. Used to. I said nothing. He left 6 years ago, she continued, voice flat enough to hide in. Still manages to waste my time. Funny how that works. I'd never heard her offer anything personal before. It felt less like conversation and more like watching someone accidentally bleed. Do you still talk to him? Only through lawyers. Then he sounds expensive too. That pulled a short laugh out of her. Real this time. Quick and surprised, like it escaped before permission. I smiled without meaning to. She noticed. Don't get proud of yourself. Too late. Her phone rang on the table. The name on the screen was visible from where I stood. Daniel, something in her shoulders tightened immediately. She let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. What? Silence from our side. No, I said Thursday. Another silence. She looked toward the window, jaw hard. I'm working. Pause. Then, quieter. You don't get to ask that anymore. She hung up and placed the phone face down. The room felt smaller after that. I busied myself with screws and nails that didn't need touching. You can ask, she said suddenly. I looked up. Ask what? What he wanted. I should have said no. Should have let her keep whatever dignity she was trying to offer. Instead, what did he want? She rubbed sawdust between her fingers. To know if there was someone else. My chest went strangely still. And is there? I asked. Her eyes lifted to mine. Slow. Direct. Rain hammered harder overhead. She stood, crossed the room, and stopped close enough that I could smell cedar dust and coffee again. Close enough that I noticed the tiny pulse in her throat. Close enough that if either of us leaned forward an inch, something would be broken beyond repair. You tell me, she said softly. My phone rang. Mara. Neither of us moved. It kept ringing between us like an accusation. I reached into my pocket, silenced it, and when I looked back at her, my hand was already halfway to her face. My hand stopped before it reached her. Not because I wanted it to, because she looked at it first, then at me. There was no anger in her face, no shock, no smug satisfaction at catching me in something weak. Just exhaustion. The kind that lives behind the eyes and makes every choice feel expensive. I lowered my hand. The room seemed to exhale around us. Rain softened outside. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pipe clicked twice. She stepped back first. Not far. Just enough to remind us there was still space if we wanted it. I should go, she said. You say that a lot. And you keep making it difficult. I'm not trying to. That might be worse. She turned away, gathering tools she didn't need to gather. The sander was already unplugged. Her tape measure was in her pocket. She opened the toolbox, closed it again, then opened it once more. I'd seen people lie smoother than that. What are we doing? I asked. My own voice sounded strange. Too quiet. Too honest. She froze with one hand on the box handle. Working, she said. No. Her shoulders rose on a breath and stayed there. This house, I said. You, me. Every day here pretending we're talking about drywall. She faced me slowly. You hired me. I know. You're married. I know. You barely know me. I know that too. Then why are you looking at me like that? Because you're the first thing in years that doesn't feel arranged. Because when you leave, the house goes cold again. Because I hear your truck before I hear myself think. Instead, I said nothing. Her mouth tightened. Almost a smile, almost pain. Exactly. She lifted the toolbox, but I crossed the room and took it from her. It was heavier than it looked. Stop doing that, she said. Doing what? Helping when I'm trying to stay angry. I didn't know you were angry. I'm furious. At me. At myself. That landed somewhere deep. She sank into one of the dining chairs as if her knees had decided without consulting her. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked unsure where to put her hands. So she hid them in her lap. I don't do this, she said. This, waiting to hear a truck in the driveway. Noticing when someone shaves. Wondering why a room feels different when they're in it. I sat across from her, toolbox between us like a third person. You think I'm calm because I'm older, she continued, eyes on the floorboards. Because I know better. But I don't know better. I just know consequences faster. I wanted to move closer. I stayed where I was. Mara laughed when I left, I said quietly. She glanced up. She thought I'd come back by dinner. She thinks everything bends eventually. And does it? Usually. Silence again. Then she asked, will you go back? I should have answered immediately. Instead, I watched rain crawl down the window in crooked lines. I don't know. She nodded once, like she'd expected that and hated herself for asking. When she stood, her eyes were wet but steady. I can survive being lonely, she said, reaching for the toolbox in my hands. I'm not sure I can survive being someone's almost. She didn't come the next day. I told myself that was reasonable. People had schedules, jobs, lives outside whatever strange weather had formed inside that house. By noon, I checked the driveway 7 times. By 2, I started fixing things badly just to stay occupied. I installed a cabinet hinge backward, split a board with the wrong saw, and nearly put my hand through a pane of glass trying to force a stuck window. At 4:30, I found myself standing in the dining room where she'd said someone's almost and stared at the empty chair like it owed me an explanation. Then I noticed the envelope. It had slid beneath the sideboard, half hidden by dust. Plain white. No stamp. My name written across it in a hand I recognized now from invoices and notes on scrap wood. I opened it too quickly. Inside was a single photograph. An old one, faded at the corners. A younger version of her stood beside a man near a lake or maybe the sea. He was smiling into the camera, wind pushing his shirt against him. Tall, dark-haired, crooked grin. He looked enough like me that my stomach turned. On the back, she'd written 3 words. I hate this. I read them 5 times. Then there was a truck outside. I stepped onto the porch before she reached the steps. You left this. I know. She stayed near the bottom of the stairs, one hand still on the truck door, as if she might need to leave quickly. You wanted me to see it. I wanted to stop lying by omission. I held up the photo. Who is he? Eli. The name came out softer than everything else she'd ever said. My fiancé. I waited. She looked past me toward the trees. He died 3 months before the wedding. Drunk driver crossed the median. She swallowed once. 21 years ago. The wind moved between us. I looked down at the picture again. Same jawline. Similar eyes. Even the stupid half-smile I'd been accused of using when I wanted forgiveness. You think I remind you of him? I know you do. That why you kept pushing me away? That was one reason. And the other? She laughed once, without humor. Because you don't. I didn't understand. She climbed the steps slowly until we stood level. Eli was easy, she said. Young in all the safe ways. Certain. Available. He loved me like there was no cost attached. Her eyes met mine. You remind me of him when you walk into a room. A pause. You remind me of myself when you leave one. Something inside me shifted so quietly I almost missed it. All this time I thought I was chasing something forbidden, complicated, dramatic. Maybe I was just standing in front of a woman who'd been interrupted by grief so long ago she'd mistaken survival for healing. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For arriving this late. Her face changed then, not into a smile. Something sadder, warmer. She reached up and straightened my collar like I was younger than I was. You're not late, she said. You're just not his turn. Then her hand lingered there, flat against my chest, feeling the place where my heart had suddenly become impossible to ignore. She stayed after that. Not in some dramatic way. No overnight bag. No sweeping decision made under thunder. She simply didn't leave when the workday ended. The sun went down behind the trees and turned the broken fence gold. Inside, the house held warmth longer now. New insulation in the walls. Fresh seals around the windows. Light bulbs where darkness used to be. We sat on the back steps with 2 chipped mugs of coffee gone cold. Neither of us drank them. The yard smelled like damp earth and cut wood. Somewhere far off, a dog barked twice and gave up. She had changed out of her work boots and sat in thick socks, knees drawn slightly up, elbows resting there. It was the least guarded I'd ever seen her. I wanted to memorize how ordinary it looked. My phone buzzed inside on the kitchen counter. Once. Then again. Then stopped. Mara, she asked. I nodded. You should answer. I know. But I didn't move. She watched the yard. Avoiding things doesn't make them disappear. No, I said. Sometimes it makes room for what was already there. That earned a sideways glance. You rehearsed that. Unfortunately, no? She smiled into her mug. The sound of it, tiny and brief, did more to me than any kiss could have. I filed this morning, I said. Her hand tightened around the cup. Filed what? Everything. I kept my eyes ahead. I should have done it before I packed the bags. Before I walked out. Before I met you. I breathed once. But before and after have been messy lately. She said nothing for so long I thought I'd misjudged the moment. Then, don't make me the reason. You aren't. I turned to face her. You're the reason I stopped pretending reasons didn't matter. That landed between us and stayed there. She set her mug down on the step. I'm scared of this, she said quietly. Me too. You're younger. Still scared. You'll regret me someday. I regret plenty already. You're not on the list. She closed her eyes, just for a second. When she opened them, they were wet but steady again. I don't know how to start over, she admitted. Good. She frowned. Why good? Because I don't want something polished. I don't want practiced. I don't know what I'm doing either. That's obvious. Rude. Accurate. We both laughed, softly, like people trying not to wake something fragile. The porch light flickered above us, then steadied. Inside the house, my phone buzzed again and went silent. She looked toward the door, then back at me. What happens now? I thought about contracts no one knew about, bank accounts, lawyers, headlines, explanations. Thought about the mansion with its echoing halls and this half-rebuilt place with paint still drying in the kitchen. Then I looked at the woman beside me in socks on unfinished steps. Now, I said, we finished the floor in the dining room. She stared at me, then laughed fully this time, head tipping back. When it faded, she leaned forward until her forehead rested lightly against mine. No rush. No performance. Just the weight of another person choosing to stay. Our hands found each other on the step between us, fingers fitting awkwardly at first, then better. The yard darkened. The phone stayed unanswered. Neither of us moved. I'm telling you this from the dining room floor. Not metaphorically. Literally sitting on the floor we finally finished 3 months later, legs stretched out, back against the wall she painted twice because the first color felt too obedient. There's a faint smear of white near the baseboard where I missed with the roller. She said to leave it. Said houses should be allowed 1 or 2 honest mistakes. The table she sanded that rainy night sits in the center of the room now. Solid. Uneven in one corner. Ours. She's in the kitchen arguing with a kettle that whistles too early. Some things don't become elegant just because they survive. That includes people. My divorce became public eventually. Then the contract did too. $400 million makes headlines faster than heartbreak ever will. Reporters wanted the business angle. Friends wanted gossip. Strangers wanted proof that money can buy revenge. It can't. It buys lawyers, privacy, square footage, temporary applause. It does not buy the moment someone reaches for your hand without needing anything from you. It does not buy peace. Mara called when the numbers hit the news. She cried first, then yelled, then laughed the same laugh that followed me down the marble hallway the day I left. I listened longer than I expected to. Then I wished her well and hung up. That was the last unfinished room in me. As for her, she still works too much. She still says no before thinking, then sometimes changes it to maybe if I wait quietly enough. She still keeps old screws and labeled jars no normal person would save. She still wakes some nights from dreams she won't describe. Grief doesn't vanish because love arrives. It just stops being the only thing in the house. Sometimes she'll be talking and go still for a second, eyes somewhere far away. I used to panic when that happened. Thought I was losing her to memory. Now I just move closer. Usually that's enough. And me. I learned that leaving loudly isn't the same as changing. I learned a mansion can feel smaller than a half-fixed house if the wrong person is waiting inside it. I learned being chosen gently can undo damage no one else can even see. I also learned older women are dangerous in very specific ways. They can spot your excuses before you speak them. They can look at you once and make every expensive thing in your life seem cheap. They can hand you a paintbrush and somehow rebuild your character before the hallway. She just walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel, pretending not to listen while I talk. What are you saying about me now? She asks. The truth. Dangerous answer. She sits beside me on the floor with that familiar sigh people earn only after 40. Her shoulder leans into mine like it belongs there. Maybe it does. The kettle screams again from the kitchen. Neither of us gets up. If you'd told me the best thing I'd ever own would be time on a scratched floor beside a woman in house socks, I would have laughed too. Funny what we don't recognize when it first arrives. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?